Hi everyone. I wanted to go over something called the National Institute of Health Standards and talk about how they're used in the real world. In the real world, when you submit a grant, these are typically the standards they use to score your grants. And the grants with the highest scores are the ones who are awarded the funds. So these are the different standards. You have significance, who the investigator is, how innovative your project is, the approach you're using, and the environment in which it's used. So let's look at each one. So the NIH standard significance means what's the impact, and there's lots of different ways to measure impact. One is how large is the need, and this is where you are explaining in your paper or in your presentation how great the need is for your population. They might also look at how large the population is. Are you spending the money on a relatively large group of people with small return? Or are you doing a small group of people with a large return? So you have to determine what is the best way to present this information so you're more likely to receive funding. The next one is the investigator, and this refers to who is running the program. If you think back in the very beginning of the semester in Online 02, I asked you who can apply for this grant. Well, as you're presenting your grant to your peers, you have to determine who you represent in a line with what the grant says. So if the grant says you can be a nonprofit organization, then the question is, which nonprofit organization are you? If the grant says that you are allowed to be a health department or another government agency, you have to determine what the government agency is that represents who you are. Individuals do not typically apply for grants, but organizations apply for grants. And so in this standard, what they're looking for is to determine if it makes sense as you as the investigative organization, could you actually run this program? So for example, if I were doing a teen pregnancy prevention program, it would make sense that I could be Planned Parenthood. If I were running a program for nutrition for elderly people, it would not make sense that I'm Planned Parenthood. So whatever organization you choose to represent, that's the organization and how we're going to determine whether or not you can actually run your program. The next one is innovation. And under innovation, they're looking for new and exciting ideas based on current research. So I'm going to give you an example of something that was new and exciting a decade or so ago. And that was looking at teen pregnancy prevention. It was determined that it did not make sense to only gear teen pregnancy prevention programs at females. Instead, they started gearing teen pregnancy programs at males, often determining that the father of teen pregnancy was an adult male. So they started to design programming to address males in order to prevent teen pregnancy. The other reason this was done is that a man can produce over 300 children a year, but a female can only produce about one child per year. So in reality, this was a creative approach. It was pretty effective, but that's an example of what innovation looks like. The approach that they're looking for, while they want it to be innovative, they also want it to show that it's proven to work. Is it well reasoned? Does it make sense? So for example, one strategy that's it's proven to be effective is peer education. So if you're dealing with elderly people, you would train elders to train other elders. If you're dealing with college students, you would train college students to train other college students. If you were dealing with survivors of rape, you would train survivors of rape to work with other survivors. So this is what they mean by the approach is proven to work. It also has to be reasonable and make sense, so it's logical. So even if there's not a lot of research to show the specific item that you're doing, there is logical reasoning behind it, which makes sense. The next standard is environment, and there's two ways to look at it. One is the environment of the field. So what will this add to the field of health education, or to elder nutrition, or to teen pregnancy, or STI prevention? How does your program add to the environment or to the field? The other one is, does the environment where this is occurring make sense? So throughout the semester, I use the concept of breast cancer as a grant in breast cancer prevention. And so it would make sense for me, because I'm working with women who are over 40, that I would use churches in the community, because I'm likely to find women over 40 in churches. If I were doing a drug-free program and I'm trying to reach adolescents who are dropouts of school, working with a church does not make as much sense, because dropouts from high school are less likely to be found in a church than women over 40. So wherever it is you're saying that you're going to do your program, it needs to make sense for the program. So those are the 5 standards and what they look for in a grant. And as you're finalizing your grant and you're putting together your presentation, you need to keep in mind what these standards are and how you are actually using them in your program.